Hey, alright, welcome to another video. If you haven't been here before, I am Georgia Jo and this is my channel where I talk all things books. So today I thought I would go through some books that I wasn't a massive fan of or that I thought were a little bit disappointing, maybe didn't reach my expectations. I don't necessarily hate any of these books, I've just either not finished them because they weren't for me or I was a little bit disappointed. But yeah, hate's a very strong word, but I don't necessarily hate any of them. I think maybe they just weren't for me, and that's okay. So yeah, let's just go through them. Okay, so firstly we'll go through the books that I have DNF'd so far this year. So there's actually only 6 books that I've DNF'd so far this year. I only own 2 of them still, which I am actually getting rid of because I just don't, what's the point in keeping books that I've DNF'd, you know? The others I've already got rid of in my last like unhaul, but 2 of them were included in the unhaul I just did recently. So yeah, anyway, let's go in order of when I DNF them. So my first DNF was actually March 3rd this year, and it was The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I know is such a massive like book on like TikTok, on Instagram, or what's it called, Bookstagram or whatever. It's such like a popular book. I just could not get into it. I really tried like 3 or 4 times and I just couldn't get into it. I just didn't enjoy it at all. It just wasn't for me. I can't really remember loads about it. I know it's about someone that is interviewing Evelyn Hugo about her like life, and Evelyn Hugo specifically wanted this girl to be like to help her write a book. But yeah, I just didn't enjoy it. I just could not get into it. I think the Evelyn Hugo, I wasn't like rooting for her. I didn't feel that interested in what like her life was. And the interviewer, who I can't even remember her name because like it was March that I DNF'd it. I don't remember ever feeling like connected to her at all. And I'm definitely someone that, you know, I struggle to get through books if I don't feel a connection with the characters. So yeah, it just fell really flat. I think as well it might have been because there was such a hype, like so much hype around it, that it just didn't live up to that hype for me. So I was maybe more disappointed than I would have been if I'd have read it not knowing how popular it was, you know? Does that make sense? Or if I'd have been like one of the first to read it or something before it grew as popular as it did, maybe I'd have enjoyed it a bit more. But yeah, I just didn't. I couldn't get into it. I don't know how far I got. I'm gonna start doing that, is writing down, because I know you can do that on Storygraph where you can write down how far you actually got into a book, but I haven't done that. Also, I've just noticed 3 of my books say March 3rd, so maybe I didn't actually DNF it on March 3rd. Maybe that was just when I realised I could put did not finish on the Storygraph. So maybe it was a bit before March 3rd, but yeah, that was the first one. The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. Just not for me. Next up, we've got What Lies Beyond the Veil by Harper L. Woods, which is the first one of the Of Flesh and Bone series. So this one, if I remember correctly, the reason I ended up DNFing this book, firstly, I feel like it was so predictable. I knew exactly where the story was going before, like I hadn't even got to the end of the book, but I knew where it was going. I feel like it was dead obvious. And then secondly, I think the point that I actually DNF'd it was like the male lead had just got naked or something and she kept using the word cock, and I think that's what I think she was talking about, is cock so much and like describing it, and I was just like, yeah, this is not for me. This is just I was like cringing reading it, you know. And I think the first time you know, fine, whatever, because that can happen sometimes where you just, some smut scenes just make you cringe. But then she like carried on and she just kept describing it. I think she was describing how like big it was and stuff like that, and I just thought, this is just not for me. I'm not enjoying it. I know where the story's going. It's just, like I say, dead predictable. And yeah, I wasn't into it. I didn't really care about the like romance or their like relationship that was going on. I wasn't asked about the sort of fae and like human dynamic. I think it was just like obvious what was going to happen. So yeah, and it's like I think there's like 4 maybe in that series. I think I only owned the first 2 at the time, which I'm glad about, which, like I say, I think I got rid of on my last unhaul, like the one before the last one. But yeah, the series is just not for me, and I didn't want to carry it on knowing that I just wasn't interested in it, and also feeling like I knew what was going to happen anyway. I wasn't about to waste my time on a 4 series book, you know, 4 book series. So yeah, that was What Lies Beyond the Veil by Harper L. Woods. And then next up we have The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake, which again I know is such a like highly rated, hyped up book in the sort of social media space, but it just wasn't for me. I think it was, so much of it was going over my head. I was having to concentrate too much on reading it, and I didn't really understand like what was going on. And this is going to sound really silly, but some of the words that they were using, I just like, I'm not about to read a book where I've got to stop and Google what words mean all the time, you know. So yeah, it was just, so much of it was going on in my head. I think I just wasn't like smart enough. I'm just not smart enough to read a book like that, which yeah, I think, no, it's not, let's not put myself down. It's not that I'm not smart enough, it's that when I'm reading, I like to escape. I want to have to not use my brain. I want to shut off and relax and escape into another world. So if I'm reading a book where I've got to concentrate to keep up, I've lost interest, you know. I don't want to carry on reading it. I'm not into it. So yeah, I think that was more the thing. If I remember rightly, it was like 5 or 6 sort of late teens, teenagers that went into a school, and they all had like specific special powers or something like that, and some of them we didn't know what their like power was. I can't even remember now what any of the powers were, but I think some of them were a little bit, didn't want to talk too much about what they could do. And they all come from like different backgrounds, and they've all got stuff going on, and I'm pretty sure you're getting all of the point of views as well. So there's like 5 or 6 point of views in the book, and yeah, I think I was just getting very confused. I wasn't enjoying it. I didn't know like where I was at. I didn't know what was happening in the story to follow along enough, you know. So, and I know it's I think it's a trilogy. So yeah, I just thought, if I can't even get through the first half of the first book, I'm gonna be screwed by the time we've got to the 3rd book. So I ended up DNFing it. I wasn't enjoying it. Like I say, I want to be able to shut off and escape and relax and not use my brain so much. And it just was like, felt like homework. Like it felt like I had to concentrate, and I needed to keep looking things up because I didn't know what they meant. So yeah, that was The Atlas 6 by Olivia Blake. It just was not for me. And then next up we have The Finish Line by Kate Stewart, which is actually the 3rd one in the Raven Hood trilogy. So I did read the first 2. I don't think I rated them very highly. I think they were both under 3 stars, and I ended up DNFing the 3rd, which is so unlike me. I feel like if I'm on the last one in a series, I may as well just finish it, but I just couldn't get through it. I think, to be fair, I think the 2nd one, I probably should have DNF'd the 2nd one and not even picked the 3rd one up, but I like gritted my teeth and got through it. And the 3rd one, I was just like, why am I wasting my time? Like, getting through this book, why am I wasting my time? Do you know what I mean? I don't need to read it. I've got so many books that I'm going to enjoy, so many new like authors and stories to discover, and I'm carrying on with this series that I am like gritting my teeth to get through. What's the point, you know? So yeah, I ended up DNFing the 3rd one. I think I was maybe like halfway through it as well. And I couldn't even tell you the storyline. I'm pretty sure it's a reverse harem maybe series, but I can't, and the fact that I've read 2.5 books of this series and I can't tell you a single thing about it. I don't know a character's name. I don't even know if it was a reverse harem. I can't tell you if it was like motorbikes or mafia, or they were like, I don't know. I honestly, I've not a clue. I don't know what the story was. It could have been about a single dad and a nanny, and I couldn't tell you. I don't know. So that's why I ended up DNFing it. So yeah, that was The Finish Line by Kate Stewart. And then the last 2 that I DNF'd, like I said before, I actually got copies of. First off, we've got My Dark Romeo by Parker S. Huntington and LJ Shen. This one, I just couldn't get into it again. I'm pretty sure I was reading it on my Kindle. I think it's on Kindle Unlimited. And I think I'm just a little bit over romances at the moment. So I just can't get into them. And this was the same. And it was just like, she is like from a wealthy family. And he is like also very wealthy. And he has to marry someone in order to become CEO of his dad's business or something like that. His dad was saying you need to be married or something. So it's like a marriage of convenience, but she doesn't want to get married to him. She kind of got forced into it by her dad. And I was just a bit like, what is going on? Like, what is happening, you know? Because I don't think it's set. I think it's set in like sort of present day or round about present day. I don't think it's set in like the old days where women were owned by men and the dad you would like pay, you know, for your wife or whatever. I'm pretty sure, if I remember rightly, it wasn't set like back then. So I was just a bit like, what is going on? You know, she's being forced to marry this man that is just not nice. He clearly is smitten by her but doesn't want to admit that. So he's just like horrible to her, but he's not smitten by her. He's not smitten by her. I've used the wrong word there. He's not smitten, but he's definitely really attracted to her, like physically attracted to her. But he just thinks she's like a spoiled brat, and she just thinks he is like an awful man, basically. Just horrible. Like the what's it called? Dedication on the not the dedication. Is it called dedication? Whatever it's called at the beginning. Says, to all the girls eager to marry a grumpy, tortured billionaire, this one's not for you. Because he doesn't come across like, you know, his point of view, you're not like, oh, he's actually really in love with her, but he's got to keep up this like persona or whatever. You know, he just is a bit of a dick. That's how I feel about it. I'm just not a fan of him. And I thought the female lead was okay. Like, I didn't find her like irritating or anything, but the male lead, Romeo, was just a bit like, oh, you're just boring, you know? So I had no desire to carry on reading it. I think I didn't even get very far into it, to be fair. And like I say, I do have it on my Kindle if I ever really want to pick it back up, but I just don't think it was a book for me. I think I'm just going to stop buying random romances unless I like, or at least stop buying romances without like reading the back first, you know? Because I think I just picked up like loads of books at one point, and now I have loads of books that I don't actually care to read that much. I need to be more picky with the books that I'm picking up, that I'm buying. Unless they're from like a charity shop and it's costing me like 50p or something, then I don't have to be as picky. But yeah, I just think it's just not for me. And that's okay, it's not for me. I know a lot of people have enjoyed this, so yeah, that was my Dark Romeo. And then last but not least for the books that I DNF'd was Before the Coffee Gets Cold by Tajikazu Kawaguchi, which is a Japanese book that was translated into English. And this book, I was so bored reading it. Honestly, I was so bored, and considering it's such a thin book, I feel like you shouldn't have time to be bored in a book this small. But honestly, it was so boring. It's about a cafe that you can go to, and you have the option to go back in time when you get to this cafe. But there's all these different rules. So one of the rules is its namesake, Before the Coffee Gets Cold. You have to come back to present day before the coffee that you just got served in real time, before that gets cold, you have to come back. So that's one of the rules, so that's why it's called that. But there's like silly rules, like you can only stay in the same seat that you're in. You can't leave the cafe, obviously, because you've got to stay in that seat. So therefore you can only see people that come into the cafe, that have been in the cafe before. Anything that you do in the past when you go back in time doesn't affect the present anyway. It's not going to change the present. And just stuff like that. I think there's a few different others, but those rules get repeated so many times in this book. And I think it's like 4 short stories, and I think I got through the first 1.5, like halfway through the second one, and the rules are repeated so many times. I just thought, this is so repetitive, it's so boring. I don't care to read the rest of them. Obviously, because the short stories, you're not expecting to get massively connected to the characters, but I just didn't care about it at all, like whatsoever. I also just thought it was a bit like the actual storylines were a bit odd. So for example, if you're planning on reading this book, this might be a bit of a spoiler, so I'll put a sort of timestamp on the screen of when to skip. So this is your last warning. I am going to give a spoiler for the first story, the first short story in this. So last chance. The first short story in this is about a woman who, her boyfriend just broke up with her. They go into this cafe and her boyfriend broke up with her in the cafe and says he's moving to America for his job. Fine, whatever. That sometimes people do that, you know, they put their career first, whatever. So she wants to go back in time to try and change his mind, but obviously one of the rules is no matter what you do, present day isn't changing anyway, but she still wants to go back in time. She's still desperate to go back, like really, it's all she wants to do in life. It's all very dramatic. So she goes back in time and she sees him, and obviously he's still broken up with her. He's still going to America because present day is not changed, but so they have a little bit of a tiff, but at the end of the tiff, he says to her, wait for me, I'll only be 4 years and then I'll be back, so wait for me. And then she goes back to present day and is dead happy with that then, because she'll just wait for him for 4 years. I'm like, what? This man has chosen his career over you. Okay, that's up to him. Don't sit around for 4 years waiting for someone to come back to you. Do you know what I mean? Like, what? If it was gonna work, go to America with them, you know? Either you go to America with them or he stays where he is. You're not gonna wait 4 years. And she was like, felt happy then, if I remember correctly. She was like, oh, that's fine then, I'm so glad I went back in time because now I know to just wait for 4 years. Like, what are you on about? What are you actually on about? So then when I got halfway through the second one and I just wasn't interested in that either, I just thought, I'm not wasting my time reading this, you know? So yeah, I'm so glad I didn't buy the rest of this series, because I was very close to reading it, because I was so buying it, sorry, because I was so convinced I was going to really enjoy this series, but I didn't buy the rest of it, and I got this one unfinted as well, so I'm glad I didn't pay full price for it. But yeah, the series is not for me, or at least this book wasn't, but it doesn't make me want to carry on the series either. So that's my last DNF for this year before the coffee gets cold. I've also picked out a few books that I was not necessarily that, well, I didn't DNF any of them, but I think I was just a little bit disappointed in them maybe, but more so because of my own expectations more than the actual books. I still enjoyed them, so I've got 4, 2 of them are related, but I've got 4 in total. And yeah, I enjoyed all of the books, but I think they just weren't as good as I was expecting them to be, you know. It was my own high hopes I'd put onto them. So the first 2 we've got is Powerful and Reckless by Lauren Roberts. So this is a novella, and this is the second one in the Powerless trilogy. Powerless I really enjoyed. I got quite into it and I thought it was really good. Just a little side note, look at these sprayed edges that the works now do. How pretty are those? So this one is Powerful and this one is Reckless. Just a little side note there. But yeah, so this one is Powerless is about Payden and Kai, and it's the magic system is they have elites, mundanes and ordinaries. So elites are obviously have the best sort of magic. Mundanes have powers, but they're not that useful to the kingdom, and then ordinaries don't have powers, and ordinaries all got either banished or killed at a certain point. So this one is about Payden's best friend Adina, and it follows her story, which is, it's nice to see what she was doing whilst Payden was like having her story in Powerless, to see what Adina was doing alongside it. It's in the same timeline as Powerless, but because you know the ending, it was just a bit like, it was there, you know, it did its job. The same as this one. They both did the job what they needed to do, but I think I was just hoping for a bit more because I really enjoyed Powerless. This one is following on from Powerless, so this is about Payden and Kai again, and the whole thing just felt like it was just one massive like cat and mouse chase. I've heard someone describe it as that cat and mouse chase, and I thought, yeah, that's exactly what it is. That's perfect. I think when I read this in my 24-hour readathon and I described it as just one big massive scene, and that's what it felt like. It's just one big chase through the whole book. But as I said again when I originally read it, it's very much a sequel, or like the second one in a trilogy where it's just joining the first and the third together, you know. I think it does that well, like it leads on to the third. I think the ending was very predictable in this. I think as soon as it was sort of hinted at, like halfway through. It could have been a few different things, but I think it was very obvious what was going to happen. So yeah, but it does lead on to the third one, so I'm excited to read the third one. I think it just maybe didn't reach the expectations that, like I say, I put on it. So yeah, that was those two. And then next up we have a novel love story by Ashley Poston. So this has such a good concept. It's basically about a woman that gets stuck in her book series that she really loves. So she gets stuck in this town that only exists in this book that she really loves. I think it was like a five book series, but before the series could end, the author passed away. I think that's right. So yeah, she ends up getting stuck in this like book world, this fictional world, but it's in real life, if that makes sense. So yeah, she ends up getting stuck there, which is such a cool concept. Like, how amazing would that be to be in one of your actual favorite books, to just live in that world for a little bit. So the concept was really cool, but I think the romance in it is just a bit like nothingness. It's just a bit random. It seems a bit random. And then there's like a third act breakup that's, you know, comes right at the end, and then it was just a bit like, what is going on, you know? It has such a good concept. It could have been so much, and it just fell a little bit flat. I think that's what it was. I'm still pretty sure I rated it like 3.5 stars, something like that, because it is really cool, and I do like Ashley Poston's writing. I think it flows really well and it's really easy to get through, and I think she has such good ideas. But yeah, it could have been so much more. It just fell a little bit flat, I think. So that was that one. And then last but not least, we have got Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. This one I was really excited for because it's described as a cozy fantasy, and the only other cozy fantasy I've read before this was Legends and Lattes and the Bookshops and Bone Dust like duology, and I really enjoyed those. So I thought cozy fantasy was going to be like my new thing, but when I read this, I just couldn't get into it. I don't know if it's because I was reading it on my Kindle and I was reading it like at night before I went to bed, so I was reading it in sort of 20-minute 30-minute increments. So I don't know if that's the reason that I just couldn't properly get into it. You know, I needed to sit and read it for like a couple of hours at a time. If that's the reason, or if it just wasn't for me. I don't plan to read the next one. I think it's Map of something. I don't plan to read it, but yeah, it was a nice book. It's basically about Emily Wilde, who is sort of very knowledgeable on fairies and likes to like write stuff, research, do things like that. So she goes to write an encyclopedia of fairies, and she ends up in these like mythical places where different kinds of fairies exist, and she's doing like I say, research on all these different species, and there's like a bit of a romance in there, and she goes on this like excursion, I guess, with this man who also is like really into like his fairy knowledge, and yeah, it's just following them basically. It's following her and then what's going on around her while she's researching all these fairies and trying to discover different species and stuff like that. So it sounds really lovely, and it is a good book. Like, I enjoyed it, but I think I just had such high expectations of it purely because it's described as a cozy fantasy. So yeah, that was the last one on my little disappointed list. There's only 4 of them. Again, I think all 4 of them are purely just because of the expectations I put on the book, more so than the books actually being like bad or anything, you know. So yeah, that was the book that I have either DNF'd or was a little bit disappointed in that I've read so far this year. Hopefully there won't be many more books that I will DNF or that I won't really rate very highly, or maybe don't meet my expectations that I'll be a little bit disappointed in. Hopefully there won't be too many for the rest of the year, but we'll see how it goes. Yeah, that is the end of today's video. I hope you did enjoy. If you did and you would like to subscribe, I would really appreciate it. But other than that, I will see you in a bit.